Hello, everybody. Welcome to the BasuandGodin Notebook, this edition of April 11th, 2025. Arpin, we are on the eve or the cusp of the Canadiens making the playoffs. They could clinch tonight in Ottawa, where you are right now. So it could happen tonight in Ottawa. It could happen tomorrow in Toronto. But it's looking pretty good. So
it could happen. It could happen without them doing anything. Frankly, I mean, it could happen.
Yeah.
They are on the verge. So by the time you listen to this, maybe it's already happened. But whatever. The Canadiens are a playoff team. I think we can safely say that. It would take a truly extraordinary sequence of events for them not to make the playoffs. So it's incredible that they've made the playoffs for the first time in 4 years, and that is story. Like totally the B story around this Canadiens team right now. Like it's not the story at all. What is the story?
Well, the story is Tyler Thorpe. So no, but you know what? Okay, so we're going to talk plenty about Ivan Demidov, and you're not supposed to count your chicken before they hatched, but still, there's the idea you bring it up. This idea that the Canadiens make the playoffs first time in 4 years. It was to a certain extent unexpected. It's fascinating that it comes second in the thoughts and the minds of people right now, because what they've done is truly surprising, and it commands respect, because for a while we had a lot of people were talking about the playoff race in the Eastern Conference as a turtle race, and does anybody want it and all that. And ultimately, the team that wanted it the most was the team that was supposed to be the furthest from that playoff spot, further away from the playoff spot than Detroit, than the Rangers, obviously. But you could argue also in their build further than Columbus and the Islanders too, who we're just trying to, stay afloat at this point. And so for the Canadiens to come out on top and be the team that showed that it wanted it the most through their ups and downs, and the fact that they had some tough stretches over the course of the season, and we buried them at times. They come out, they prevail, and so kudos to them, because it's honestly, there are long stretches in the season where you could not really see that happening. They got help from other teams that did not seize the occasion, but you've got to give credit to them that, when the other faltered, they rose up.
Yeah, and when you think about it, really, like this season, they had basically two breaks, right? They had the Christmas break, they had the Four Nations break. And they came out of each of those breaks on massive winning streaks.
Yeah.
And so I find it interesting, it's obviously the Christmas break preceded the run through Florida, Tampa, Vegas, Chicago, Colorado. They won, I guess, 7 of 8 or 6 of 7 coming out of that Christmas break, where we thought that they'd be buried. Come out of Four Nations, obviously, and win 5 in a row, and now have won 6 in a row to kind of claim that, to win that turtle race. Which they decided to no longer be a turtle in. So it's a credit to them. And I think it speaks to the coaching staff's ability to kind of take a step back when they do get that time to do so, reset, reprioritize certain things, and get these guys to play a certain brand of hockey that they feel is winning hockey. I found it interesting listening to Marty talk after practice on Thursday, talking about their game against Detroit and how they can play against teams that bring pressure. All you have to do is be willing to put it past the pressure and get it back. Like, you can give it back to them, but they're going to give it back to you because now you're the one pressuring, and it seems like this has been a push and pull struggle for Marty to convince his team of this over and over and over again throughout the course of the season.
A sales job.
Trust the forecheck. A sales job. Trust the forecheck. And he knows it's not fun because he played. He knows it's not what all kids grow up dreaming of doing is flipping pucks behind the defense and forcing them to give it back to you in a better situation or in a better position. You know, essentially what the Canadians do, and they're not the only ones, but essentially what kind of hockey has become is become like a field position game where, you know, in football where like the defense is kind of dominate and you're managing field position the whole game. I feel like that's what the Canadians are looking to do more often than not, or at least their coaching staff wants them to do, is let's win the field position battle. Let's play in their end more than they're playing in our end. And we can do that by putting pucks deep and going after it and forechecking and playing in the offensive zone. And, you know, to quote Marty, get our O-zone going, which means working the puck around and tiring out the defense and making them confused. And so, you know, that's been a constant thing that he needs to get his team to remember, that they're at their best when they do that. When they get away from that, when the puck management is not there, as it has not been in the first period of each of the last 3 games minimum, if not even 4 against Boston.
Yeah.
It's less convincing, you know, and it's not true that the Canadians are going to be able to overcome first periods like they've had in the last 4 games and continue to win games against a single elite opponent in the first round of the playoffs, whether it's Toronto or Washington. You're not going to get away with that. So the clock's ticking to get that fixed, and like, let's see if it happens tonight. But it's clear that every time, you know, this is kind of the first situation this year where the Canadians are playing poorly, but they're winning regardless. Not poorly. I shouldn't say poorly. They have a clear issue with their starts. They're winning games regardless, which is a good sign because the resiliency and all that stuff, sticking with it and coming back, like all of that is good. I mean, I was talking to Caulfield the other day about what we were talking about. Like, I gave him the stat that since December 30th, you've trailed after 2 periods in 22 of your 41 games. And he was kind of like, what? Oh, that's not good. I was like, no, it's not. He's like, yeah, we're going to have to clean that up. I mean, we're confident going into the third period down a goal, but I don't think he had realized that it was as frequent as it was, you know? And so he kind of acknowledged, yeah, that's not good at all. Like, we need to avoid that. So the more that these guys get that realization that the first period is of vital importance to play the brand of hockey that's gotten them here, that's going to allow them to have playoff success. So you
mentioned also the fact that they came out strong out of the gate after the 2 breaks. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you're right to credit the staff, the coaching staff, but I think that there's also the fact that the Canadians are a young team, and sometimes young players, even though I know a lot of them will argue we're young in age, but we have a lot of experience in the NHL. I'll buy that argument, but still, younger players will probably have a tendency to, when things don't go right, to that there's a risk of getting into a spiral. And when you have some time to step back and recharge, you can reflect, say, okay, we just took ourselves out of the situation. We can assess how things what happened, how things went, and we go back into it, and now we're ready to go. And you've got like a new opportunity just because of that little pause that you benefited from, just to give yourself a bit of a perspective. And I wonder, it's just a theory, but I wonder if the fact that the Canadians were a younger team specifically benefited from that pause in that set, more as a mental reset than a physical break. And in that sense, you could say, well, they're going to have a few days preparing for the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Maybe that could be one of those little pauses, little breaks, where they're going to reset, reestablish what their priorities are, even though Marty is banging, on the same nails over and over every day. It's like you interview the players and they repeat the same sentences that Marty has been repeating to them over and over. So, but again, maybe that those few days before the end of the regular season, the beginning of could could provide them with similar type of readjustment. So it'll be interesting to see in that
it's
sense.
a similar break. It's a similar break to the Christmas break, and they do have the advantage of finishing the season on Wednesday, right? Both Washington and Toronto have a game on Thursday. So which means that the Canadiens are not likely to start the playoffs until Sunday. I think the league is going to try to avoid asking teams that play on that final Thursday to also play on the opening night of the playoffs, which is Saturday, the 19th. I would imagine, and I'm pretty confident in saying, like, they're not going to make those teams that play on Thursday night only have like 48 hours until their first playoff game. So the Canadiens could be looking at a break from basically Thursday morning till they play Sunday afternoon or night, depending on who they're facing, which would be a mini break. And considering how they've come out of these breaks, I think,
or even Monday.
Or even Monday, yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
Who knows? So, because I would imagine, Sportsnet's not going to want the Canadiens on an afternoon on a Sunday, but
No.
I would imagine ABC might want Alex Ovechkin on a Sunday afternoon if they were to face Washington. So we'll see what happens with the scheduling, obviously. But either way, the Canadiens are going to finish their season a day before both of their potential first-round opponents they're both playing on the Thursday. So if you look at the way they came out of the Four Nations break, the way they came out of the Christmas break, that if that trend continues, that's an advantage for this Canadiens team. So we'll see. But then you throw in the X factor of Ivan Demidov.
Yeah,
I gotta stop saying Ivan Demidov, and incorporating the runway that they have to incorporate him. Minimum, well, let's say, in all likelihood, a minimum of 2 games on Monday and Wednesday to see what he can do. That break after Wednesday to work through some scenarios and come up with some solutions, and let's see how we can use this guy. It's a real puzzle that this coaching staff is going to have to put together here relatively quickly, but it's a really, really good problem to have, right?
No kidding.
You're adding this supreme talent, very young, but already a year of men's professional hockey under his belt, going through the ups and downs of what that looks like, but learning how to compete with men. I mean, this is a difference. I have made, and I think we made, but I've made a lot of comparisons between him and Lane Hutson just because there are a lot of similarities between the two guys, and they have become close. Well, I wouldn't say close friends, but they have kept in touch all year since meeting at the draft in Las Vegas. And
pen pals.
Pen pals, yeah, text pals.
That's it.
They've been texting, and yeah, Lane Hutson on Thursday. Lane was like, have you kept in touch with him? Yeah. Well, whenever he does something pretty cool, I just kind of text him and say, that was pretty cool. Keep it up. And as he said it, he kind of laughed because he realized how silly it sounded. I'm like, that's the quote, man. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to quote you on that. And so, but what Lane did not have entering in the last 2 games last season and even coming into this season is he did not have a long runway of playing with men and playing with teammates that are of this quality. And yes, the KHL is not the NHL, but Ivan Demidov was playing with very, very high quality hockey players, grown men. Nikishin just got released to join the Hurricanes. He was the captain of that team. Demidov was on the ice a lot with him. Obviously, his most common center this year was Evgeny Kuznetsov, who, whatever happened to him in the NHL happened, but still, was
a lot of experience there.
A legitimate candidate to win the Conn Smythe Trophy the year they won the cup. He had a tremendous playoff that year. And others like that, they're just high quality, grown adult men hockey players. And so Demidov, in all the tape that I watched, he, like Hutson admitted that when I got here, I wasn't used to playing with guys who are this good. And so he wasn't used to using his teammates. And that's one of the things the coaching staff emphasized with him early in the season was the guys that are on the ice with you are really good. You got to understand that. They're way better than anyone else you've ever played with. So you got to incorporate that into your decision making. I don't think Demidov's going to have that problem. Like, you watch him play in Russia, especially, well, I just watched his playoff games. You watch him play, he uses his teammates a lot, even there. You know, I mean, like he's not deferential, but he's not just hanging on to pucks needlessly. You know, like he'll move the puck when it needs when need be, and if he has space, he'll hold on to it. But he's already gone through that phase because of having a full season of playing professional hockey with men, and so I think that's going to make his transition somewhat easier. There's a lot of things that are going to make it difficult. One of which is not the ice size, by the way. Ska Arena uses an NHL-sized ice. Even in that playoff series, Dynamo Moscow, to me, looked like either used a hybrid ice or an NHL-sized ice, but it wasn't a full international ice surface. But he played all his home games at the very least, and a lot of KHL rinks use NHL-sized ice. So I think there's a notion that he's going to have to adjust to that, and I don't think that's as real of a thing as people might think. But otherwise, just this idea that your teammates are just as good, if not better than you, he's already gone through that. Like, he's passed a step that Hudson had to pass this year with Montreal, that he himself admits now that he didn't fully grasp at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and even his first couple of games going back to last year against Detroit, Hudson realized that how good his teammates were, and he says, I realized how easy it could be if I was playing the right way and I was moving pucks quick. So it's when there's this idea among talented players that the NHL is not the hardest league because the players you play with are so good and they're always in the right place. So if you're looking for teammates to be where they're supposed to be, and you understand hockey well, if you're playing with guys who are where they should be, it should make your life easier. So I think that Hudson embraced that. We'll see with Demidov. I think that a lot more than the ice surface, the pace of the game, how quickly the opponents
style of play,
the opponents close on you, and they take away your time. That's going to be a challenge, and the fact also that he arrives like in the height. It's going to be playoff hockey. Teams are at their most ruthless and dedicated. So it's not an easy environment, but we've seen that in the past. We've seen other players arrive, very late in the game and find ways to contribute. So it's I'm excited to see that. And you referred to your piece where you caught a lot of clips from his playoff games. The thing really that stood out for me is how effective he is at finding pockets of ice. And the second that he passes the puck, he moves. He's constantly in movement, and will find either position himself for the next pass option or just find a pocket of open ice to set up for a shot. So he's I think that his brain works very, very fast, and so at this point, it's not how fast you can skate. It's how fast you can think. So that's another parallel with Hudson. Even though, and they are similar skaters, and they're a 10-2. Their edges and the way how agile they are a lot more than in their pure speed. But there's going to be, I think that the brain remains the attribute number one, and something that playing with good players, great players, should be on showcase rather rapidly. Although people, the way he's been welcomed in Toronto, and the way people are talking about him right now, he's not the second coming either. It's like sometimes I would like people just to take a deep breath and just not put the expectations too high right off the first day or the first game he'll play.
Well, yeah. Yes and no. I mean, honestly, listen, it was, what happened at the airport demonstrated to Demidov, I would imagine. I haven't spoken to him, obviously, but, one thing that Hudson said on Thursday that I think really resonates with what we saw is him saying, he just seems like he loves it and he's happy to just play. He
Mm-hmm.
just seems like such a nice guy, just excited about what's here. I think he understands how important hockey is here and he loves it. So normally I would look at the welcoming committee that was waiting for him at Pearson Airport in Toronto and say, oh, I don't know if he's going to, I don't know if that's a great first impression. There's like a mob scene. It's like this and that. And you kind of heard all the people yelling at him, like sign a jersey, this, that. Like it was a thing, it was a big thing. From the way Lane described it, it sounds like, and basically from what he said after he got drafted in Vegas and what he said about playing in Montreal, that probably made him feel pretty good.
Yeah. Well, he had a big smile on his face. He looked like, there's people here for me, and I'm not even in Montreal, by the way.
Yeah, and the Canadians had to arrange for that police presence. Basically, as soon as they saw the flight information got leaked out, they called the Toronto police and were like, listen, we're going to need a hand at the airport, and they came and provided it. But yeah, I think he would have. I think that wouldn't have a negative impression on Demidov, and I think it would just show him the extent to which A, hockey is important, and B, how important he is to this whole thing. And I think that was one of the primary motivations of the Kent Hughes, Vincent Lecavalier, Nick Bobrov trip to St. Petersburg in December. A, make sure he's doing okay and he hasn't really kind of cracked under the pressure that he was under playing under Rotenberg, not playing that much, all this. They want to make sure he was okay, but they also want to communicate to him the extent to which they are planning for his arrival. They can't wait for his arrival, and make sure that, that he had no intention of signing with Scott and that he would be coming anyhow, just to solidify all that. But they did want to reassure him to some extent, just how important he is to them. Well, if that trip didn't do it for Demidov to say how important he is to them, I think the welcome party at Pearson Airport got the job done. So congratulations to those who made it out there. I think you delivered an important message to this kid. He's an important part of what the Canadians are building here. And honestly, the reaction of the players to the signing, especially Cole Caulfield, Cole Caulfield after that game.
Oh, he was excited.
He was fired up. Everyone's fired up.
Yeah.
I can't wait for him to get here, to be honest with you. And he was just he was beaming, He's like, man, I can't wait for this kid. And so
Samuel really Montembeault was the same. Hudson was the same.
It was the same. Everyone was pretty much everyone. It wasn't unanimous, but more or less everyone was like, that kid that I've been watching highlights of all year is now going to be lining up next to us. Bring it on. Just as we're entering the playoffs, this is a bit of a game changer. So yes, he's not the second coming. Yes, expectations do need to be tempered, but the reality is, this is the most talented offensive forward. I'm not going to say player because I think Hudson has played himself into this conversation, but he's the most offensively talented forward the Canadians have drafted, pure talent, probably since Lafleur. I think you're going back, and I don't think that's hyperbolic. I don't think that is an exaggeration. If you just think about it.
Well, the hype, what's interesting is that, because somebody asked me on the radio that same question, is it true that it goes back to Lafleur? And you start peeling the onion and going back draft after draft. It's okay, because it's not. You can't say that it's Pacioretty. It's not. It's not Galchenyuk. It's not Koivu. No. And then I remember there was a lot of buzz around Shane Corson when he was drafted, but it's more than Corson. I stopped at Doug Wickenheiser, who in his own right was, you could call him a bust because of the rank that he was drafted at, but doing some, when I wrote a piece at The Athletic about the 1980 draft when he was drafted first overall, there was huge hype over him. They should have drafted Denis Savard came after the fact. It was not right on the moment, oh my God, what did you just do? He was consensus number one. Consensus number one, yeah. So I guess at the time of his draft, there was a hype regarding Wickenheiser that was not too far from what we saw from Lafleur. We just can hope that Demidov is going to fare better than Doug Wickenheiser did.
Well, and also I should say that So the year after they drafted Lafleur, they did draft Steve Shutt number 4 overall, and
Mm-hmm.
so maybe since Shutt,
Yeah.
in terms of pure offensive talent that they drafted and that they're incorporating onto their team, either way, we're talking about more than 50 years of drafting.
That's right. And
So,
we're talking also, and it's probably another it's people will touch on that on Monday because the Canadians will welcome the Chicago Blackhawks, but you have also after Macklin Celebrini 3 teams that passed on him, and the fact that he was still available to them at number 5 remains to this day a great draft gift for the Montreal Canadiens.
yeah,
I
it
mean,
was a good bounce.
we keep bringing the term a help that Trevor Timmins, how he described the fact that he was able to draft Cole Caulfield in 2019, that some teams provided a help. Well, in this case, I mean, whether it's Lev Shunov, who at some point it had become clear heading into the draft that he would be Chicago's guy, but after that to have Anaheim select Beckett Seneca, and then Columbus drafting Caden Lindstrom, who has yet to play a game this year.
Right.
That's crazy because so he really fell in the Canadiens' lap in a way that they must count their blessings today.
Yeah, and well, it'll be interesting. I mean, if him and Lev Shunov will be probably going head to head on Monday, I would
Yeah.
imagine. Lev Shunov's still playing. I'm just looking right now. Like he's been in the lineup. So yeah, he'll probably have the number 2 and the number 5 pick going head to head in what is likely to be Demidov's debut on Monday night. But yeah, it was. I mean, listen, there were all sorts of questions about Demidov's ability to get over here and whatever, and I mean, I think the players that went ahead of him all have great attributes. It's not as if they picked a bunch of stiffs ahead of them. So, Caden Lindstrom, frankly, if the back issues weren't there, I mean, that guy looks like a total stud, right? But the back issues are there, but still. It was not only lucky that Columbus took Lindstrom, they were lucky that Columbus liked Lindstrom so much that they refused that Blackhawks offer to swap first-round picks and offer up their unprotected 2025 first for the number 4 pick. Plus, I'm sure there would have been some sort of sweetener in there, but that would have been Chicago getting Lev Shunov and Demidov, which would have been a total coup. If the Columbus Blue Jackets and their scouts, led by Trevor Timmins, or no, maybe not led by, but
well, they're like a 2-headed monster, a little bit like Barbroff and Lapointe in Montreal.
So
him and Ville-Sirène.
If they were not so enamored with Caden Lindstrom, because Don Waddell, remember, had just arrived, right, as GM, and similar to Bergevin picking Galchenyuk when he had just arrived, and the same guy, Trevor Timmins, really wanted Galchenyuk. I don't think Waddell really wanted to step too much on his scouts' toes, and Lindstrom's a fine prospect, and I think he's going to be a great hockey player, assuming he can stay healthy.
Yeah.
But that was like a double lucky bounce in the sense that the Columbus not only preferred Lindstrom to Demidov, they preferred him to such an extent that they refused a chance to probably get the number 2 pick overall this year, as it turns out, which would have given them Michael Misa or whoever, who knows? Like, I mean, it's the top of the draft. Overall, the draft this year is kind of meh, but the top of the draft is pretty enticing. There's some really enticing players there. So anyhow, all that to say, big bounce for the Canadiens. It's going to come to fruition on Monday. So now, Marty won't talk about his usage, understandably. Doesn't mean we can't. So I think we should. What do you think? Now, I think that the prevailing sort of wisdom has been that he's going to slot in on the second line with Newhook and Line A, and then we'll see how that goes. This is where I think it would be important to have that. If they could get Demidov into the lineup against Toronto on Saturday, like if they had clinched the playoff spot and if they feel comfortable playing him, it would give them just extra runway to just try different combinations with him, like try him with different players, see how he does.
Yeah.
Because I think there's something to the notion that, he would play, like they're not going to touch the Dvorak line, right? They're not going to touch the Suzuki line. presumably, which leaves the Evans line and the Newhook line as potential landing spots. And I think both of them have different merits in different ways. Playing with some more possession-based players in Evans and Armia could help Demidov kind of do his thing in the offensive zone. He wouldn't feel necessarily the need to defer to anyone on his line, and he could maybe express himself more freely. I would imagine playing on a line with Laine, he'll feel overly, he'll want to defer to Laine. He'll want to set him up to score. Like it would be a natural thing for a kid to do. I don't think he would have that on an Evans line. I think there's merit to both, and I think if I were Marty, I would try both over those last two games at various points, assuming they have a playoff spot, obviously, just to see where he fits best. And at some point over those two games, I think he should get some time on that top power play unit because they could use some help. And we're going to get into the power play a little bit more, but that spot that Juraj Slafkovsky's been trying to learn all year, that goal line / net front spot, Demidov has lived there all season and been very effective playing on the goal line for SKA. That doesn't mean he'll be effective in Montreal, but again, if I were the coaches, I'd want to take a look at that at some point in the last two games.
Yeah. Well, first regarding the lines, I think that we must not need to Galaxy brain it too much because when it comes to pairing Demidov with Evans, I mean, really, it's Martin St. Louis will look at creating lines that he can use during the playoffs, and during the playoffs, he'll have a specific mission for Jake Evans' line, and it will be a defensive assignment. And on the other end, I would expect Alex Newhook to be heavily favored in terms of offensive zone starts and offensive zones face-offs. And if you want to shelter Demidov to a certain extent, I think this is the best opportunity you got because you want to be able to provide some secondary offense. You've been looking for an ingredient to translate, to convert, the transition qualities of Newhook plus Laine's shot into something that could give you some offense on that second line. I think that you have to look at Demidov and say, well, he's the guy that could bring his own ingredients to put it all together. Because even though he might not be like a pure forechecker, and he might not be what Heineman or Kapanen provides you, he's a more talented player, and he's going to be able to create something. And you need to take those few games to understand what that something is. If you take some time to make some experiment and say, we're going to start him slowly with Evans and all that, to me, this is to a certain extent time wasted because you've got quality players that will be pushed down the lineup, Heineman and Kapanen being obviously the main two guys, that will help bolster that fourth line, in my opinion. So there should not be, I don't think it would be an easing in of him. Honestly, I do understand what you say about Evans's usage and his mission. A lot of D zone starts, what have you, is totally valid. And Newhook will get those offensive zone starts. But one thing Demidov does exceptionally well is attack off offensive zone draws. Except he can't attack off offensive zone draws if the guy taking the draw loses the draw. And so I don't know how many clips I saw of Kuznetsov snapping an offensive zone faceoff back to him and him just attacking space and attacking the net and getting off a dangerous shot right off the draw. It happened. I just watched the 6 playoff games. It must have happened at least 4 times. Honestly, it was a pretty frequent thing. And if he wasn't snapping the shot to the net, he was executing a set play or making a pass that was dangerous. But often it was always preceded by him attacking space. So he'll attack space, and that'll either open up a pass opportunity for him, or he'll just get the puck to the net. But he needs someone to win that draw, in order to do that. Sure, and that's but you cannot put. Yeah, I know, but I don't think that this is what you need to base your decision on because you cannot put Evans in too many offensive zone draws either. He's taken already 100 ozone draws less than Newhook, and Newhook has not taken them all year, for the duration of the whole season.
Yeah.
But I mean, you look at defensive zone face-off percentages. Newhook's at 44. Evans actually the best on the Canadians at 56.8. But we all know that Newhook is not good at face-offs. Maybe that if they establish some strategy where you need to put the puck, if you win the puck sideways just by pushing it to your winger instead of pushing it backwards, more like protecting it more into your into your territory or towards your more of your teammates, it could be a way for Newhook to win more draws. I don't know, but I think that all in all, even though it's a nice feature that Demidov provides, it's probably something that's going to be exploited over time. But for the time being, you cannot. I would not look at that element and say this is what's going to predicate how we're going to use it.
I think the added element that would add to it is just playing the possession game, right? Like Newhook and Laine don't do that, particularly Laine, obviously. So there's a lot of one and dones with those guys.
Yeah,
you don't get to spend that much time in the offensive zone. Now, maybe Demidov would change that, but I think that's asking a lot of the kid. It would just be nice. Listen, to be clear, I think he's going to play with Newhook and Laine. We don't know where he's going to play, but I think that this decision will not be galaxy brained at first. I think it's worth looking at what he looks like with Evans and Armia and see if that might work too. Because I agree, a lot of defense, like it would not be sheltered minutes, but they would be sheltered in the sense that he's playing with two pros, like really professional hockey players who are executing what Marty wants done in an exemplary way. And have all season, despite Armia's recent, and frankly, if they clinch, like Armia is probably going to get rested. You would think he should get rested. So that would be a way to get him on that line and at least look at it. That's all I'm saying. I don't think he should play the playoffs with Evans, at least not right now. But I would be curious to see that and how it compares to him with Newhook and Laine, just because like the faceoff thing is just one factor. But to me, it's the fact that those guys cannot spend consistent amounts of time in the offensive zone. On one hand, you have Laine who handles the puck like it's a grenade. But on the other hand, you have Newhook, who does have a tendency to create scoring chances for himself very quickly. And then once the scoring chance goes, and he more often than not doesn't score, unfortunately for him, the puck's leaving the zone. But with good reason, because he created a scoring chance and he shot it, But if I would be curious to see what he's like spending time in the offensive zone, and he's not likely to do that a whole lot with those two guys. That's my only point. But I do think that is option A for sure. Mm-hmm. But if they have runway to see what option B and even option C might look like, give them a few shifts. I mean, it's going to sound ridiculous, but like if the last two games don't mean anything, give them a couple of shifts with Caulfield and Suzuki, or Suzuki and Slavkovsky, or whatever. Like, let's see what that looks like, And so it's really a perfect situation for the Canadians. They can experiment a fair bit. They'll also have practices coming out, in preparation for their first round matchup, where they can try lots of things. And I think, while the Laine Newhook match is what we mentioned on our emergency pod on Tuesday, because that was the first reaction, I think more I've thought about it, the more it could make sense to do something else. And it for a host of reasons, but primarily because Newhook and Laine have not shown an ability to consistently spend time in the offensive zone. To me, that's my one reservation with those two guys.
Well, I think that I think that Marty will stay true to the to Slav with Suzuki and Caulfield, 100%, at least for the time being, because he'll want to enter the playoffs with a maximum of certainties and things that are known. You don't want to start experiments and put some instability at a time where you need to have a sense of security and knowing what you got. So for the same reason, I don't think that he's going to touch the Dvorak line either. But it's still, to me, the it's still an experiment and something that's incomplete when it comes to Newhook and Laine, and you haven't found the guy that can be like the perfect complement to those two guys to make it work. So that's why I see Demidov say, okay, you arrive, we're going to put you on a line that is not something that's already a certainty, something that is well balanced and that we're completely happy with. It's a lot to ask, maybe, to be the one that's going to make it work. But at the same time, it's the responsibility of the two guys, the two pros, especially Laine, who's in his mid-20s, who's seen a lot. It's their own responsibility to make it work more than the complementary winger, be it Heineman, Kapanen, or a newcomer like Demidov. But I think that even though Demidov is as a very dangerous shot that he releases quickly, I think that he's got also some good passing acumen. And if he is to play with those two guys, this is the part of his game that you'd look to exploit the most, so that at some point it'd be like the passing leading to a scoring chance. You'd like him to be the guy making that pass and make sure that he can identify good spots where Laine is available, because otherwise there's no there's no perfect balance on how to make sure that those guys are going to spend a lot of time in the offensive zone. Yeah, you can have a guy that's going to be F1, that's going to go get the puck deep in the zone, but after that, is that the same person that's good at doing that is also going to dish the puck for good scoring chances to Laine? Maybe not. So why not try Demidov?
There's also the reality that, and I think we mentioned this on a previous episode, but we have a tendency to look at Laine and be like, who's going to get him the puck? Whereas it's time to start wondering, like, is Laine doing enough to get open and to be in areas of the ice where guys can find him? And
that's a good point.
There's a lot to be desired in Laine's game, right? Obviously, and he has to be in the lineup because he is such a power play weapon. But I think Demidov could find him. But you mentioned how good Demidov is at finding pockets of ice. Laine is not good at that. He is flat out not good at that. And so it's going to take adjustments on multiple levels to get Laine to score at 5-on-5. Having Demidov for sure, I'm sure it would help. But I'm just saying it's not guaranteed to work. And so there should be a plan B if it doesn't, so that you're not handcuffing this kid with a combination that hasn't worked, frankly, most of the season at 5-on-5. And of late, look at this segue, power play either. hasn't looked on the power play either. So heading into the playoffs, it was interesting. I practiced on Friday. It was very much a fun practice.
Yes.
Small, short ice, scrimmage, kind of like just go out and have fun and enjoy what's going, enjoy playing for a little bit. Because the Canadians are legitimately extremely tired. They got a bit of a break this week after playing on Tuesday and not playing till Friday, but still. But the power play got no work on Thursday. I can't remember the last time we saw them work on the power play at a practice or a morning skate. A lot of them have been optionals. You don't have the entire power play on the ice. But so the power play hasn't scored in 9 of their last 10 games, entering obviously the game Friday night in Ottawa. Watched them score like 3 goals against the Senators, but still. Entering that game, 9 out of 10 games without a goal, 2 for 22 in that span. And it's just like you look at some of the metrics, expected goals per 60, shots per 60, like all sorts of – they're just not good. They're not generating a whole lot. And that's – so, Martin was asked about that on Thursday, and he just mentioned how we're not quick enough. We're not executing quickly enough. We allow the opposing team to reset and get back into their structure and all that stuff. And it's hard not to look at Ivan Demidov as a guy who plays very quick, because he does. And they have Lane Hudson already on that unit. He plays very quick. The guys who are not playing quick on that unit are Patrick Laine and Juraj Slafkovsky. And Laine, if he's in your lineup, if he's on your roster even, you would be stupid not to put him on the power play. So if I'm Juraj Slafkovsky, I'm wondering, you know, he's going to have to up his game because he's the vulnerable guy to me on PP1. Like if they ever think of putting Demidov on the power play, especially since he plays that position on the goal line, that's a vulnerability there that could strengthen power play too. But I'm sure Juraj Slafkovsky would not be thrilled about that after spending the entire season on the first unit. If that were to happen, I'm not saying it will, but it could, because the power play is not giving Marty any reason to not at least try that.
No, you're right. You're right. I think that I fully agree with Marty's diagnosis regarding them being, too slow in their movement. It seems as though they waste a lot of time trying to set up the perfect play. So, and they say, well, we're not going to shoot a lot, but this is going to be shoot to score when we do. But in the process, it's been so difficult for that first unit to set up in the offensive zone. It's complicated. Just crossing the blue line and set up. I think that the other teams, it looks as though they found ways to counter them in a way that, the second unit doesn't have that problem. I asked Marty, what was 10 days ago, or maybe 2 weeks, about, if he thought that there was an issue with the number of guys at the blue line, more often than not, it's Suzuki who's carrying the puck. And, cause you got guys that are there to create picks and basically it's like almost like an offensive line in football, where you just let your running back, you give him a path to come in. But when you have too many guys doing that, you don't have enough guys as passing options. And I think that it's been a problem for that first unit, just to create some diversity when they enter the zone. And Marty was like, yeah, well, for the most part, there's been some games where we could have been better, but I don't consider that as being a big problem. But the shot volume is a problem, and it's always, when you have such a talented weapon like Laine, it goes back to the Shea Weber days, where you say, okay, well, we've got that big gun, but if he's going to be a decoy or the other team is going to cheat on that side, how can we develop other threats? And in that sense, I feel like as though Slafkovsky has not asserted himself enough. And there are games also where Caulfield seems to swim in the offensive zone, trying to find those pockets of open ice, but there doesn't seem to be a clear pattern as to where he goes, where he should be. It changes a lot, but I find that he's going to be there for rebounds and little tips and whatnot. But there seems to be very few opportunities for him to shoot the puck outright on the power play, and to me that's unfortunate, because it's a wasted weapon. He should be a guy that triggers, almost as often as Laine, and we don't see that.
No, and he doesn't. Every time he drifts into the bumper, he never gets the puck. And that, to me, not to pick on him, but that's Slav. Like that, the play goes from Suzuki at the top of the right circle down to Slav at the goal line, and then Caulfield is on the opposite goal line, will drift into the bumper, and that puck's not coming, And so, like, that's an issue. Another adjustment they made recently, that I asked Marty about on Thursday, was not having Laine be the outlet guy up near the blue line. You mentioned all the guys on the blue line. Well, the guy on the left side of the close to the boards on the blue line is the guy that once Suzuki or Hudson cross the blue line, he's there as an outlet to kind of, if the pressure comes on the puck carrier, you chip it out over to the boards, and then that player has to make a play. And of late, Laine had not been making that play. He'd get the puck chipped over there, and invariably it would wind up on the other team's stick, and it would be down the ice. And so apparently a few games ago, I hadn't noticed until last game, they put Slafkovsky there into that spot, and they moved Laine to the other side of the ice on the entry, which to me is like, they've done so many things to accommodate, to make up for Laine, right? Like they have to go through so many hoops to get him set up in that left circle with the puck in possession and get him those shots. And frankly, those shots have not been all that dangerous of late either. Like he's kind of whiffing on more one-timers which we did not see at the beginning of the season. When he gets a hold of one, he doesn't fully get everything on it. It's happening. That's happening more often. I thought his success rate on one-timers earlier in the season was astonishing. He could take a bad pass, turn it into a dangerous shot. It didn't have to be perfect. It didn't always have to be in his wheelhouse. And there could be people in the shooting lane. He would still get it by them. Now his shots get blocked more often. He's missing. It's happened a number of times over the previous games where he just flat out missed on a one-timer, which looked weird because he almost never does. If that continues, honestly, if he continues to struggle, when they do get him a one-timer opportunity and it doesn't get to the net, they're going to have to consider taking him off the power play at some point, because if he's not shooting effectively, literally nothing else he does on the power play is helpful.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of OV in the type that he he waits for the shot.
Yeah, but OV, yes, there is. But when
just to draw the parallel, in the years of the best Washington Capitals power play, I mean, Ovi is still the same threat to shoot than he ever was. We've seen it time and time again this season. But when they were at their best on the power play, you had other threats. You mentioned Kuznetsov, Backstrom, Oshie in the bumper. Oshie almost reinvented the bumper position on the power play in the early 2010s. And now there's not that many. I mean, they're middle of the pack team, but they're not like this uber PP threat that they used to be back in those golden days of their power play. And it's all because, yes, you've got that one guy, but do you develop other threats? So again, I mean, if the other team sees to cheat on Laine, you got to give him the puck, because whenever he scored on the power play, the Canadians won. It's almost an automatic. Are you going to really say, well, we're going to deprive ourselves of that tool, because otherwise might as well not play him at all, because we discussed it many times over the course of the season how 5-on-5, it's not really, it's not really his thing. So at least use his shot on the power play.
Well, he has to get the shot off. That's what I'm saying. Just recently the shot's been an issue. He's not connecting as often as he was. It's not an automatic that the puck is going to head over there and he's going to unleash a dangerous shot off of it. It still happens. It's not like it never happens, but it's not as automatic as it was for most of the season, of late at least. It's really and that can come back, and I'm not. If Laine is shooting it like he knows how to shoot it, there's no question in my mind that you have to put him on the power play. But if he's not, then you gotta adjust, right? And I think a big reason why the power play has struggled of late is that they're still trying to set up that shot. He doesn't get it off, and then it's down the ice.
Yeah.
And so, no one, listen, the numbers speak for themselves, right? Patrick Laine is not only on this team, he is probably the most lethal power play player in the league, in the world. But you got to kind of watch for tendencies, and of late, I've noticed, and I don't have any numbers to back it up, but I've noticed that he's not connecting on his one-timers quite as often as he was earlier in the season. And if that's the case, then they got to make, if that's still the case when they get to the playoffs, they're going to need a plan B, and they're going to have to implement it pretty quickly, because if he doesn't have that element of him, then he's not helping anything. And so I think that could be an avenue to you getting Demidov on that unit.
Yeah, that's it.
Continues. Yeah.
But that would be at the expense of Slav, right? Not, I mean, more than Laine.
If Laine is not hitting that shot, you could put Demidov in there for Laine. You could put Caulfield back in that spot. Like there's ways to compensate for not having Laine on that spot, and maybe Laine would do better on the second unit, maybe which is more of a free flowing, unit that kind of is always in attack mode and really rushed to get some offense going because they only have like 30 seconds to do it. Maybe you could find some shots for Laine in those circumstances, but like right now he's not connecting, and that's fine for now. And frankly, I would leave him there for the rest of the regular season so that he can find his rhythm and get his confidence back on his shot. But in the playoffs, if after game one, let's say, he's still flubbing or whiffing on shots, I think you got to consider something else.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
So, but let's say, I mean, Slavkovsky has not set the world on fire lately. Marty was saying that he felt as though when he's at his best, 5-on-5, he plays with pace, and he feels as though he's one of those guys where the heavy schedule and just finishing the regular season has sort of affected him in that sense and reduced his pace. I don't expect him to lose his spot on his line with Suzuki and Caulfield, but it could be an intriguing pressure point to say, well, you're going to be moved to the second PP, and then have a second power play where you've got Gallagher, still got Suzuki there for the full 2 minutes, Newhook, Matheson, and Slavkovsky, which is a more than decent, in terms of personnel, it's more than decent second unit. And say, well, if the first unit gets out of the zone twice, you can try to bring the second unit in sooner. That's what they did in the first quarter of the season to interesting results.
They did it the other night too. Did they not?
Yeah, but that was more like a message sent to the first unit. At first, early in the season, I thought that there was more a balance of trying to find two good units. Laine was not there back then, so but the second unit was more effective, and it had more 50 seconds than 30. So maybe that you could try to rebalance that if the problems continue on the first unit in terms of getting the shots to the net and creating enough movement and making sure that you stay in the zone. And if you don't, well, if you've got a stronger PP2, well, get them out there for a few more seconds, because Newhook doesn't have any problem at putting that.
Demidov.
Yeah.
Especially if they have Demidov, for sure. So I said I don't have numbers, but I do have one. So on the season, Laine lets go of roughly 40 shot attempts per 60 of the power play, which is bonkers. But his shots on goal per 60 is well above 20. It's 24 or something per 60 minutes on the power play. Since March 21st or March 22nd, when this 10-game stretch of futility began, he's still getting as many attempts. He's at 44.82 attempts per 60 on the power play, but his shots per 60 is down to 16.3. So the attempts have not gone down. The shots on goal have gone down pretty dramatically for Laine over the last 10 games. So
right.
That's a sign that those shots are not leaving a stick with as much violence as we've grown accustomed to seeing, and so that's something the problem is that's something that could come back at any moment. It could happen tonight. He'll just find it again, and it's a gift that he has, and that no one can coach it into him, and no one can anticipate when it'll come back. But he seems to have lost it to some extent, and the Canadiens need him to find it by April probably 20th, when they start the playoffs, or maybe 21st. Clock's ticking there, and if they don't find it and they do enter the playoffs, like, Marty can't afford to be overly patient with him finding it. That's the thing. Is like, playoffs are not a time for patience.
No. That's for sure. And you don't get too many power play chances during the playoffs, but you need to score on them.
You got to cash them in, especially. The Canadiens. It's going to be tough for them to score 5-on-5. Like, whether they play Washington or Toronto, like, Toronto is not the same old Toronto Maple Leafs. I think Craig Berube has them playing a more typical playoff brand of hockey. It's going to be and Washington's been a good defensive team all year, so it's going to be tough. But anyhow, we'll see.
The Leafs also have their best blue line in years. I mean, they play. I think they're going to play 5D. They've got
They're going to play
there's
5D tomorrow. Yeah.
Ekman Larsson's
Ekman Larsson's potato day.
Yeah, but for the course of the season, I mean, they've had quality bodies. It's not just a bunch of n'importe quoi, Morgan Riley and friends. Like it's been for some times. Yeah. It's a legitimately good defensive course.
I like the Carlo trade a lot. That was a good deal.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Absolutely. Time for Future Friday.
Future Friday.
For Future Friday, I believe you went to Laval this week.
Well, it's because I got to tell you that Samuel Montembeault, we asked him after the game against Detroit his impressions about Ivan Demidov joining the Canadiens, and he was all giggly and excited, and he said, I was not aware of it. Basically, it's a tremendous ad for us, but I was not aware of it. I learned about it when I woke up from my nap. But we signed Thorpe today too, but for some reason it flew under the radar. But I thought it was so cute that
it's very on brand Montembeault humor.
Absolutely. To bring Tyler Thorpe in the conversation. Hey, don't forget Tyler Thorpe. Yeah, well, everybody had forgotten.
It was a big day for the Canadiens' future on this day, and not just because of Demidov.
No, that's
Thorpe
it.
Is coming. I don't think there were people waiting at the airport for Tyler Thorpe.
No. Probably a lot of people that not even recognize him when he arrived. So I think it's an interesting story to have him. Shortly after being drafted. Everybody knows, right when you're a 5th round pick for the Canadiens, and he was playing obviously again this season with the Vancouver Giants. He's mainly known as an offensive guy, but he said, "Listen, this year we had such a young team that I was handed more defensive responsibilities. So in that sense, I feel as though my 200-foot game has improved." And the Giants had a quick exit in the playoffs, which explains why he was given this amateur tryout with Laval. His entry level is going to kick in next year. And he said, my goal is to turn pro next year. So he says, my play here with Laval and training camp next fall should pave the way for that. So, I mean, you must think that if they bothered to jump the gun and sign him so quickly, because they had more time, it suggests that they see a future for this guy. So it would be then unlikely that he would return for a 20-year-old season in Vancouver. But he's excited for the opportunity, and he says he was told by everybody. He says, "Get ready, man, because this is going to be the hardest jump that you'll have in hockey. It's going to be to go from junior to the American League, even more than from the AHL to the NHL." And it was just I was there for his first practice. And he says, it's a lot faster. It makes my league look slow. So this is what he's facing now.
So there are a number of reasons why Canadiens fans should have paid attention to Tyler Thorpe signing, even though it happened on the same day as Ivan Demidov signing. Number one is, and you mentioned they had a year to do it, but the Canadiens are going to have a lot of drafted players that they don't sign. They can't sign all. They've drafted so many that they're going to have to very judiciously hand out these contracts to players that they have identified as being part of their team building philosophy. And what does Tyler Thorpe have that makes him unique? He's a massive human being, right? Like, he is a huge, huge player. So the other thing, he's a draft plus one, right? Like he didn't get drafted in his draft year. He got drafted the year after. So, much like Florian Jacki was drafted the year after his draft year. But unlike Florian Jacki, well, maybe somewhat similar to Florian Jacki, but what, my take on that is like, there's no chance they're sending him back to Vancouver because he's so big. And in Vancouver, he plays an offensive role that he will not likely play in professional hockey. So the Canadiens, having signed him, it would do them no good to send him back to Vancouver because he'd basically be playing a role. He wouldn't be preparing for his future role in the organization. He would have to play an even more prominent offensive role next season with Vancouver as a 20-year-old. Whereas he should be learning how to play more of a bottom six checking role as a pro, which is what he's going to probably be doing if he ever does play for the Canadiens, but definitely would be doing even in the AHL. That's one thing. The other thing that makes him kind of an interesting project for Montreal is, this guy, like my understanding is that in minor hockey, like going through in the Vancouver area, playing minor hockey, like no one really knew about him. He wasn't all that good because he was still growing and he was still trying to figure out how to play at his size. And he's still trying to figure that out. And frankly, he's not even close to really knowing how to use his size to his benefit in the pro game. Because the other reason you wouldn't send him back to Vancouver is how tall what is he, 6'5"?
He's 6'5".
Yeah. So when he plays in the WHL, he often finds himself on the ice with like 16-year-old kids, where if he's overly physical with them, he winds up in the penalty box because he's big. And basically his shoulder comes like at head level of a 16-year-old kid, and he hits a kid and he hits him in the head and he winds up going to the box. So he's not perfected the full potential of his size because he's had to rein it in a little bit playing junior hockey. So it doesn't seem likely. In fact, it wouldn't make sense for the Canadiens to sign him to his entry-level contract and send him back to the Vancouver Giants. The only reason, because they didn't have to give him an entry-level contract. Right? They had another year to do that. The only reason you would give him an entry-level contract now is to start his pro career and to get him to start playing his version of professional hockey, which I think the Canadiens view as being a relatively violent, physical, hard to play against version of what he did in Vancouver, where he wasn't that. Like he has an NHL level shot already, right?
Yeah.
What he's going to need to figure out is how to maneuver his way around the ice to get it off. But really what he's going to need to figure out is how can I go out and punish my opponents in a way that's going to make sure I get on the ice on a regular basis as a professional hockey player. Like that's going to be his ticket to the NHL, is being a talented, skilled guy who hits people and uses his size to his advantage, as a forechecker, as a defender, everywhere. But he's got to be 6'5" all the time, and he's got to take full value of that 6'5"-ness,
That's good. You just dug that old Mike Babcock quote about Frédéric Gauthier, right? Yeah. He's 6'5" exactly. And 80 shift every shift. Yeah.
That's what he's got to be. He's got to be that,
Yeah, for sure. Because even though he's got a great shot, he did not dominate offensively. I mean, as a 19-year-old in the Western Hockey League. I mean, he finished the regular season with 3 goals in 12 games. Mm-hmm. I mean, you would expect more of a guy if you have a legitimate prospect. He's got tools, but I think that what it suggests is that this is not the part of his game that will take him to the next level. So you got to look at other stuff. So when you mention, going after guys, being on the forecheck, use his size, the skating will have to follow. And I think that that's the thing that he's the most aware of, because when I was saying that, he said that only in practice it was a lot faster, just among the Laval Rocket team. This is going to be the biggest adjustment, because he said, listen, in a span of 2 years, I went from 5'7" to 6'5". So it was it was a crazy, crazy growth spurt. So the skating was never going to catch up with that and enable him to, to develop as the rest of his game. So if he allows time to his body to adjust to skating and develop it with his quote unquote new body, well, then it's going to serve his other assets better down the road. That's why I think it furthers to your point, going to the American League and training and playing against men and playing in the faster league will force him to follow that. So he said, you know what, as soon as I'm done here with Laval, I've already got a skating coach that's lined up, and this is definitely what he's going to work on.
But you look at so you mentioned the late growth spurt, right? Like his U15 year, according to Elite Prospects, goes back to his U15 year. He had 12 points in 30 games. U17, because obviously that's when COVID hit. So his U17 year, 17 points in 33 games. His U18 year, he played 10 games in the BCHL, 3 points in 10 games, 48 games with the Giants, 6 points. Then that's his draft year. Doesn't get drafted, 6 points in 48 games, not a shock. Last year, he puts up 44 points in 51 games. And this year, 52 points in 68 games. But the reality is that, that late growth spurt is a big reason for a lot of that. The only reason he's of NHL interest is because of the late growth spurt, because he's 6'5". But he has nowhere near enough experience being that size. Like, you don't have to be 6'5" when you're a kid, but you have to be bigger than all the other kids, and you start to learn how to take advantage of being bigger than all the other kids at that age. He didn't have that, by and large, and so
it's like Seneca, right? Seneca had a similar story.
Had a very similar story, except the difference with Seneca is he was like this super skilled offensive dynamo kid who was just really small, and then he got big. So now he has those super skill hands on a really big body. I don't think that's Tyler Thorpe, but Tyler Thorpe does present a unique, like, he's going to need more runway because he has no clue how to use his body yet. Like, he hasn't had it for long enough. And now he's going to get, like, in Laval, in all likelihood, he's going to get access to their coaching. He's going to get access to tougher competition, to better teammates, and just he's going to have he's going to get time, and it's probably going to take 3 years, probably the entirety of his entry-level contract, to learn how to be 6'5" all the time.
Yeah.
That's the big thing for him.
So for the time being, though, GM John Sedgwick in Laval told those all the guys that were signed, or brought in on a PTO, all the newcomers, he made no promise as to how much they would be used. So how much can we expect necessarily that Tyler Thorpe? Yeah, exactly. So can we expect Tyler Thorpe to play many games? No, probably not. So we'll see what happens. But I think at this point for him, it's more an experience than anything. He's not necessarily thrown in there to be a decisive or valuable contributor to this team that's super well positioned. As an aside note, the situation might be different, obviously, for Jacob Fowler.
Especially with Connor Hughes injury helps.
Yeah, but you know what? They would have played him, Connor Hughes, healthy or injured. He would still have games played.
No,
and it's funny.
If the Connor Hughes injury leaks into the playoffs, he might get some playoff action.
I think that Fowler... No. Hughes is not going to play again. My suspicion is that Fowler right now is their number 2. And you know how I mentioned on Monday's podcast, was it Monday or last week? Anyway, I compared, the situation with the Hurricanes, Cam Ward and Martin Gerber. Well, Pascal Vincent said, a few years ago, I heard that, it was in Laval, it was Kevin Poulin who started the playoffs. And after a little bit, Caden Primo was given a chance and he ran with it. So he opened the door to exactly that same opportunity, except that right now, Caden Primo in this story is not Caden Primo anymore.
No, he's Kevin Poulin all of a sudden.
That's it.
Yeah.
So So, you better deliver, Caden, because the kid will be ready behind you. So
Well,
he's
it's good,
so
good for them to have two options. That's for sure.
well. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what you want when you're deep in the net, and that's what you want when you're a competitive team for the playoffs. So we'll see how that goes on Friday. Primo starts, but there's a door open for Fowler to potentially make his AHL debut on Saturday. We'll see about that. But going back to Thorpe, yeah, funny tidbit there. So he comes from Vancouver, from Richmond, and he went to the Rockets game on Sunday in Abbotsford. And he was there
no
with
way.
it. Yeah, and he was there with his dad. And his dad said, "Why don't you just hop on the plane with them?" So they had a good giggle Sunday.
Yeah, right.
And then he arrived on Tuesday. He signed his thing. He signed his contract very quickly. It happened very quickly. And on Tuesday, he was with Laval. So he said, "Yeah, maybe I should have hopped on the
Maybe
plane
you
with
should have
them."
hopped on the plane with them. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, the point, I think the main point that our listeners should take away about Thorpe is don't poo-poo the fact that he got an entry-level contract. It is a huge statement from the organization to give this kid an entry-level contract, considering they took him in the 5th round. Doesn't have a lot of pedigree. It's a big sign that the Canadians view him as a potential piece of their team in the future, because they're not going to just give out entry-level contracts to everyone. And for him to get one now, if I were him, I would look at that as a big endorsement of what they believe, what they think of him. But I would also look at it like, I need to get to work because these
Yeah.
guys see a future for me, but I have a lot of work to do to get there. But the fact that the Canadians see a future in him, I found very, very interesting that he got an entry level contract, because we're going to be shocked, I think, by some of the names that don't get entry level contracts in the coming years.
Yeah. So he's going to rekindling with Luke Tuck, who he was on the line with him during rookie camp. So now
Right.
they're going to be teammates. And
it was him, Tuck, and Jacky. No, was it not?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a nasty line. Yeah, it was. No, but he was like this kind of the star of rookie camp in some ways.
Yeah.
Like Tyler Thorpe really was the one that opened the most eyes. Let's say. I guess no one really had expectations for him, but he had an excellent rookie camp, and he looked really good on that line. So let's see.
Well, those guys, it's another one of those big top bottom 6 guys that you can develop. They're probably not going to hit all 3 of them, but you need to improve your chances. And he's got a profile that, with the proper development, he could be one of those guys. So,
and just remember, the Canadians have to counterbalance the fact that their top 6 is going to include Cole Caulfield, Ivan Demidov, and to a lesser extent Nick Suzuki, 3 smallish guys for the foreseeable future, and there's going to need to be a counterbalance. And so I think the Canadians looking at size to fill out their forward group down the road makes some degree of sense, but I think it's a priority for this organization that they do that, because you look at how they viewed Jacky, and you look at how they view like this back-to-back years where they've taken a draft plus 1 guy that has some snarl and size, could potentially fight, be physical, and have hands to score. This is a similar profile that they've drafted at a similar spot in the draft 2 years in a row. And they could make up 2/3 of their 4th line within 2 to 3 years. It's not outrageous to think that.
Just out of curiosity, before we end this episode, when you said we'll be surprised with the guys who don't get an entry-level contract, I mean, there's a lot of them that were, because they were overagers when they were drafted, they ended up getting signed rather quickly. But who do you have in mind? Koivu?
I don't have any. Well, it could maybe. I don't have any particular names in mind. What I do know is the Canadians have drafted how many people in the last 3 years? Like it just.
Well, there's Rohrer also. That's probably a question
Rohrer,
mark.
Who's a question mark right now?
Yeah, you got guys.
Gando, they already haven't signed. They signed Davidson, but he's got an AHL deal. There's going to be guys that we think, like, I'm interested. Like, what are they going to do with Sam Harris? Like, I'm curious to see what they're going to do with him. Is he going to go back to school? Maybe, but he's getting to that point where he's scoring a lot on a really high end team. Like, there's just going to be guys that people get excited about that might not wind up getting contracts. Like, it's just because you can't draft whatever the number is. I think they've drafted 25 kids over the last 3 years, something like that. I can count it right now, but I mean, it's somewhere in that range. 20 kids, you only get 50 contracts a year. That's reality, and these contracts count. Like, these are NHL contracts. Like, Tyler Thorpe got an NHL contract here.
They got 30. They drafted 30 guys in the last 3 drafts.
There you go. So something's going to have to give in terms of who gets contracts.
No,
and
for
who
sure.
doesn't, so it's like,
for sure.
It's just math. I'm not really thinking of guys in particular, but in this context, for one of the most recent fifth round pick, for him to get a contract already, he's literally the first player from that draft class to sign. He signed hours before Demidov did. So it's remarkable. It's remarkable for this fifth round pick to get an entry level contract as quickly as he did. Like, the Canadiens really have to see something in him in order to have done that.
All right. Well, on that note, I'll let you go to the rink. It's always a trek to get back to Canada. Yeah. So exciting weekend for the Canadiens, who could clinch tonight in Ottawa. They're going to play the Maple Leafs tomorrow. Potential outside possibility of them being their first round opponents. So we'll take a look at that. Demidov is waiting for the team in Toronto. He had some issues to sort out at the U.S. Embassy today. So, and most likely we'll see his debut on Monday in Montreal, which, when you think of it, is how it should happen anyway. Have his first game at home. I'm
sure Blackhawks fans will react very rationally if he puts up a hat trick on their team on Monday night. I'm sure Blackhawks fans won't overreact to that at all.
Well, if he scores a hat trick on his first game, forget the Blackhawks fans. I wonder how the Canadiens fans, how rational they would remain.
I mean, this guy. This is a very similar situation to the Canadiens facing the Flyers with Mitchkov for the first time. Like, it's very similar vibes in the sense that Chicago, a lot of people in Chicago were very upset that the Blackhawks did not take him at number 2. Rightfully so. I mean, Levshunov looks to me like a very special player, and everyone knows the importance of getting a right shot defenseman. Obviously the Canadiens did not draft Mitchkov to take their right shot defenseman. So, but yeah, if Demidov scores even one goal, I think Blackhawks fans are gonna do some grumbling, I would imagine. But I'm sure they're very happy with Levshunov, though, and they should be. I think he's going to be a really good player.
Yeah, absolutely. Plays already. I mean, in his first, he's played 15 games already with them, and plays over 20 minutes a night. So
yeah,
that's pretty good.
He's looked great. Honestly, like really, really good. So I hope Blackhawks fans don't overdo it if Demidov has like a special night against them, because they do have an excellent player. But I'm sure pockets, just like there are pockets of Canadiens fans who still have not forgotten the fact they did not draft Mitchkov, there must be massive pockets of Blackhawks fans who have not forgotten the fact that they did not draft Ivan Demidov to play with Connor Bedard for their entire careers.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you on Monday, Arpin. Thanks, everybody, for watching and listening, and we'll be back for the subscribers episode on Monday. So have a good weekend, everybody.